I have always hated hotels. Dingy carpets, beds that seem like they've never been washed, dirty, foul-smelling bathrooms. For someone like me, who is obsessed with cleanliness and germs, it's like a nightmare come to life. Now think about that the next time you stay at a hotel. You truly have no idea who was there before you, what they did on the mattress where you'll sleep, or on the carpet where you'll walk barefoot. If you're curious, you could even bring a blacklight. But be careful. What you might find could be more disturbing than you imagine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The truth is, as much as I hate hotels, I seem to be constantly forced into staying in them. Whether it's family trips with my parents and siblings or must-attend work conferences that have me traveling across the country for discussions that could easily be done over video calls, I despise every second of it. In fact, if I counted, I'd say I end up in a new hotel every 3 months. And that's how I first heard of the Gateway Hotel. My boss, the biggest jerk I've ever met, sent an email on a Thursday, demanding that I attend a conference in Oregon to negotiate a merger with a smaller company. It wasn't a request, it was an order. I let out a deep sigh as I realized I'd be forced once again into a draining trip, all just to please that idiot. The silver lining? The paycheck made the stress somewhat bearable. The following night, just after midnight, I was pushing open the heavy, creaky door of room 415, where I'd be staying. I was so exhausted that I didn't even care much about the room at first glance. I turned on the light, and the room looked like any other cheap hotel. I threw my bag on the tiny kitchenette counter and collapsed on the bed, grabbing my phone to pass the time until sleep took over. But as I looked up, something caught my eye. On the wall opposite the bed hung a peculiar painting. It was of a blonde woman, dressed in an elegant, eye-catching red gown. I approached, and the beauty of the woman at first seemed almost hypnotic. However, as I looked closer, an unsettling feeling grew inside me. Something was wrong. The woman's hands were bent behind her in a rigid, unnatural way, as if they were tied. The way she was posed, standing stiffly and slightly leaning forward, made me feel as though she might launch herself out of the painting at any moment. Something about her face was even more disturbing. Though she was smiling, her eyes held a hidden rage. Her teeth, impossibly white and perfectly aligned, gleamed unnervingly, and her eyes seemed to follow me as I moved around the room. Discomfort hit me instantly. Why the hell would anyone put a painting like that in a hotel? My stomach churned. A sense of unease washed over me. I decided it would be best not to look at it while I tried to sleep. I climbed onto the bed, took the painting off its nail, and turned it face down against the wall. I didn't want those eyes watching me during the night. I felt a bit more at ease, but as I sat back down, I heard the rustling of something beneath me. I stood up and saw that under the blanket was a folded light blue piece of paper. It had been there all along. At the top, in large letters, were the words, "Welcome to the Gateway Hotel." Feeling slightly uneasy, I unfolded the paper and began to read. "Welcome to the Gateway Hotel. We are pleased to have you and hope you enjoy your stay. However, for your safety and satisfaction, there are a few rules that must be strictly followed. Please read the following instructions carefully. Do not destroy or move any furniture in the room. It makes our cleaning staff's job more difficult, and additional fees will be added to your bill if this rule is broken. Please do not engage in sexual activity in the room. Our cleaning staff already has enough to deal with, and there is a specialized hotel for that a few blocks away. Do not leave the television on overnight. We must keep the electricity bill under control to continue offering quality stays. Do not leave uncovered food in the room. This could attract unwanted creatures. Use the refrigerator or cupboards to store food properly. Do not leave your room between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. That is when our cleaning staff works in the hallways, but don't worry, they will do their best not to disturb you. If the room phone rings at 4:14 a.m., do not answer. Try not to bring beach sand into the room. It's difficult to remove from the carpets, and it causes problems for our cleaning staff. Keep the curtains closed at night. Some guests have reported seeing figures looking into their rooms. Between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m., you may hear a child crying for help in the hallway. It is vital that you do not look through the peephole or open the door. No one needs help at that time. If you see a blonde maid in a red uniform in the hallway, look away and return to your room. Our maids wear light blue uniforms. Do not try to interact with the maid in red. If the maid in red blocks your path back to your room, use the stairs and avoid the elevator. She will not follow you unless you make prolonged eye contact, which will be seen as an invitation. If you are in the elevator and notice a button labeled B2, do not press it. We do not have a second basement. If you accidentally press the B2 button, do not make eye contact or speak to whoever enters the elevator on that floor. Face the buttons, prevent them from touching anything, and press L to return to the lobby. When you arrive, report it to the front desk immediately. Do not enter room 414 if you see it open, even if you hear someone calling your name from inside. Do not approach or attempt to close the door. Contact the staff immediately. That room is off limits. Thank you for choosing the Gateway Hotel. We wish you an excellent stay and remind you, follow the rules. Sincerely, the Gateway Hotel staff. I stared at the paper, unable to believe what I was reading. What kind of joke was this? Some employee must think it's hilarious to scare guests with this sort of dumb prank. Part of me wanted to call the front desk and complain, but when I looked at the cheap digital clock beside the bed, it was already almost 12:30 a.m. I decided to let it go. It wasn't worth making a fuss over something so stupid at that time of night. If I was really bothered, I'd mention it in the morning when I checked out. I lay back down, pulling the scratchy blanket up to my neck, but my mind wouldn't settle. The content of that paper was disturbing. I closed my eyes, but soon opened them again. Crap. I had already broken the first rule. I moved the painting. I jumped up, heart racing, and looked at the wall. My throat tightened. The painting was back in place, and the woman in the painting, she looked even closer. Her face, which was already bizarre, was now twisted in an impossible smile. Her eyes, darker and more fixated on me, radiated a hidden fury. I squeezed my eyes shut and climbed back into bed. I wasn't going to touch that painting again, that was for sure. Maybe I was just getting paranoid. The rules must be nothing more than a sick joke, right? But then, why did I have this chill down my spine? Maybe it was just accumulated fatigue. Update. 1:12 a.m. I can't sleep. Something just knocked on my window, and I'm on the 4th floor. I'm not exactly sure how to describe what happened that night. None of it made sense, nothing at all. I try to convince myself it was some sort of hallucination caused by sleep deprivation, but deep down, I know what happened was real. I'm writing this now, not because I want to relive that horrible night, but because I feel like I have to. Even if this account manages to stop just one person from staying at the Gateway Hotel, it will bring me some peace of mind. After my last post, I was frozen in bed. I heard the knock again. Part of me said to ignore it, but the more rational part wanted a simple explanation. Maybe it was just the wind or a tree branch. Slowly, I got up and walked toward the window. The most terrifying thing? I could feel the woman's eyes from the painting following my every step. She was watching me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, but I kept moving. I grabbed the edge of the curtain, closed my eyes for a second, and without thinking, yanked it open. I wish I had never opened those curtains. The figure outside was not just unexpected, it was unnatural. It was a man, or at least something that used to be a man, with pale, almost gray skin that seemed to be disintegrating. His face was completely deformed, with pieces of rotting flesh hanging from his jaw. But what paralyzed me was the decayed smile he gave me. Broken, yellowed, and brown-stained teeth were exposed, as if the creature was relishing the fear it was causing me. His eyes were sunken, lifeless, yet somehow fixed on me with brutal intensity, as if they were hungry. The thing was right there, at my window, on the 4th floor, tapping with a long, deformed nail on the glass. I couldn't believe it. There was no balcony, nothing for it to hold on to. It was as if gravity didn't apply to it. A shiver ran through my body so intense that I took a step back. And then it happened. I screamed. The sound came involuntarily from my throat, as if it was the only possible response to the horror I was witnessing. I staggered backward, my knees nearly giving out, and fell onto the bed, my mind struggling to find any logic. That thing was impossible. Whatever it was, it shouldn't have been there. Quickly, I reached for the phone by the bed, dialing the front desk with trembling fingers. The voice on the other end was the same as before, indifferent, almost annoyingly calm. "Gateway Hotel reception. How may I assist you?" the woman asked, her voice sounding disinterested. "There's a man at my window. I'm on the 4th floor. How is this possible? Please refer to the rules provided by the hotel. The 8th rule indicates that the curtain should remain closed at night. I'm on the 4th floor. How can he be there?" My voice was breaking with pure desperation. The response came, cold and almost mechanical. "That has never stopped them from peeking. Now that you've acknowledged him, he will continue tapping until dawn. Ignoring the knocks would be best. Remember to follow the other rules. Have a good night, ma'am." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Now that you've acknowledged him." Those words echoed in my head, mixed with the monotonous tapping on the window. The fear inside me was almost tangible. I gave up trying to make sense of it. The paper with the rules was crumpled beside the bed. The rules. I had to follow them. I crawled back into bed, pulling the rough blanket over me as if it could protect me from the nightmare outside. The tapping continued, rhythmic, incessant, each knock echoing in my mind like a countdown to something worse. I glanced at the cheap digital clock beside the bed. 1:46 a.m. I had to endure. I tried closing my eyes, blocking out the sound, but my mind was racing. The tapping wouldn't stop. The face of that creature at the window wouldn't leave my mind. My whole body trembled with fear. All I wanted was for the night to end, for me to leave that cursed hotel and never return. Time seemed to crawl, each second dragging on as though I was trapped in some distorted dimension where terror reigned. Then, a louder knock made me jump. I turned back to the clock. 2:02 a.m. The tapping had stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was as thick as the fear that surrounded me. For a moment, calm took over the room. The persistent terror of the tapping gave way to a tense quiet. I almost let myself believe that the creature had gone away, that maybe, just maybe, I could get some rest that night. But that hope was quickly shattered when I heard a new voice. It was faint, distant, but clear enough to make my heart stop for a second. "Mommy." The voice of a child echoed softly through the hotel hallway, like a whisper among the walls. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. I quickly turned to the clock. 3:02 a.m. The rules. I remembered one of the rules more clearly than any of the others. Between 3 a.m. and 4 more a.m., you may hear a child asking for help in the hallway. It is vital that you do not look through the peephole or open the door. The child's voice continued, now sounding more desperate. "Mommy, where are you? I can't find you. Help me." The sounds of soft sobs and the echo of tiny footsteps filled my ears. Every part of me wanted to check the peephole, just to confirm that it was a trick of my mind. But the rule was clear. I couldn't look. I couldn't even approach the door. The light from the hallway, which normally filtered through the gap under the door, was suddenly blocked. It was as if something or someone was standing there, right outside. My heart began to pound so hard, I feared it would burst out of my chest. Then, a soft sound, like a gentle knock, came from the door. "Miss, can you help me find my mommy? I'm lost. Please open the door. I'm scared." I clenched my jaw, trying to stay strong. This wasn't real. That wasn't the cry of a lost child. I knew what the rules said. Nothing needed help at that hour. But hearing the child's voice pleading so desperately was tearing me apart inside. "Please, miss. It's so dark. I need help." I didn't respond. I stayed silent, motionless. I knew that if I said anything, the thing outside might interpret it as an invitation. The crying continued, growing fainter, until finally, after 20 long minutes, I heard the soft footsteps moving away down the hallway. My whole body was drenched in cold sweat, but it still wasn't over. Before I could process the relief of having made it through that ordeal, another familiar knock echoed. The window. Not again, I thought, trying to mentally prepare myself for another appearance of the being that had terrorized me earlier. But this time something was different. The fear was already so deeply ingrained that I simply couldn't bring myself to look. I stayed there, frozen, ignoring every knock. I wouldn't look. I didn't even entertain the idea of seeing that face again. Yet the presence of the painting, the blonde woman with the twisted smile, still haunted me more than the creature outside. The knocking continued for several minutes, and then it stopped. Calm returned, and for the first time that night, I had the impression that I might just make it until morning. I kept my eyes on the clock. 4:02 a.m., the hour before the final test. The phone. 12 more minutes. Just 12 more minutes. Those 12 minutes dragged on in an almost unbearable fashion. Every tick of the clock was like a dagger to my heart. I was trapped in an endless cycle of anxiety. When the clock finally struck 4:14 a.m., my whole body tensed. I waited. Nothing. The phone didn't ring. I waited a few more seconds, my eyes fixed on the phone beside the bed, as if at any moment it could explode with a deafening sound. But nothing happened. The clock ticked on to 4:16 a.m., and the phone remained silent. An unexpected wave of relief washed over me, so intense that my tense muscles all relaxed at once, causing me to sink into the bed. I had survived. The knocking at the window had stopped, the child's voice in the hallway had disappeared, and the phone, well, the phone never rang. I thought it was finally over. I was wrong. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what exactly had happened in that cursed hotel. The silence was deafening, and even without the knocks or voices, there was something oppressive in the air, as if the very atmosphere was alive, watching me, waiting for the next opportunity to catch me off guard. I felt a tightness in my chest, a growing anxiety, as though, somehow, I still wasn't safe. Even so, there was a sliver of hope. 10:30 a.m. couldn't come fast enough. I got up carefully, every movement measured, as if any mistake could trigger another trap in that place. I checked the rules once more. I wasn't going to break any of them. I closed the curtains again to make sure no more horrifying creatures hung outside my window. I packed my things, tossing everything into my suitcase without care, ready to escape as soon as the clock allowed. I glanced at the clock again. 6:05 a.m. 2.5 hours passed in silence. Nothing else happened. I sat there on the bed, unable to close my eyes, adrenaline keeping me wide awake. I didn't allow myself to relax completely. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind passing through the window made me jump, as if the hotel was about to pull the rug out from under me. It was like walking on a thin layer of ice, knowing that at any moment it could crack. 10 a.m. With a sigh of relief, I approached the door, peeking through the gap. The hallway seemed empty, the faint light illuminating the stained red carpet. Absolute silence. I gripped the doorknob tightly, checking for the 1,000th time to see if I had forgotten anything. Just as I was about to open the door, I heard a sound that was neither a knock nor a voice, but the click of a lock. My heart stopped. The door to room 414 was opening. I turned slowly, as if I were in a nightmare, forcing my body to react. The sound of metal scraping and the heavy wood moving echoed through the silent hallway. The door, which the rules stated should always be locked, was now wide open. The air seemed to change, becoming heavier, denser, as if the very atmosphere was charged with the presence of something or someone. I swallowed hard and took a step back. My entire body trembled, and my instinct screamed at me not to look. I knew the rules. I knew room 414 was off limits, forbidden, but it was as if, in that moment, something was pulling me toward that open door, something invisible, yet impossible to ignore. And then, I saw her. Standing in the doorway of room 414 was the blonde woman, the same woman from the painting who had haunted me throughout the night. She was there, in real life, wearing the same vibrant red dress, with the same empty, furious eyes, and that smile. That damn smile full of teeth, which now seemed to stretch from ear to ear, in an unnatural, supernatural way. For a brief second, my eyes met hers. Eye contact. I knew I shouldn't, but it was inevitable. And in that moment, I felt something worse than fear. I felt that she was coming for me. She didn't move, not immediately, but the silence in the hallway became almost unbearable. It was as if time had frozen, as if the world was waiting for something terrible to happen. The rules echoed in my mind. If you see a blonde maid in a red uniform in the hallway, look away and return to your room immediately. Do not make prolonged eye contact. That will be seen as an invitation. I had looked for too long. My heart began pounding violently in my chest. I needed to get out of there. There was no more time to hesitate. I dropped my suitcase and ran for the stairs, not looking back. Every step felt longer than the last, the sound of my own footsteps echoing against the hallway walls. I reached the stairwell, nearly stumbling as I opened the door. Every step I took down was filled with a heightened sense of alertness, ready to hear any sound, to feel any presence. Was she following me? I rushed down the stairs as fast as I could, almost falling once or twice, but I didn't stop until I reached the ground floor. I shoved the exit door open with all the strength I had left and burst into the lobby, breathless and with my heart racing. The reception was empty. Too quiet. There were no guests. Where was everyone? The hotel had supposedly been full, but the lobby and parking lot were empty. It all felt like a grotesque lie. I ran to the front desk and threw my room key on the counter, trying to keep my voice steady. Room 414 is open. You need to close it. Now. The woman behind the counter looked at me with the same enigmatic smile as before, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, as if all of this was completely acceptable. I hope you enjoyed your stay at the Gateway Hotel, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, almost monotone. I didn't respond. I couldn't. All I wanted was to get out of there, fast. I called a car to pick me up, and when it finally arrived, I tossed my suitcase into the trunk and got into the back seat without hesitation. As the car pulled away from the hotel, I looked out the window. The Gateway Hotel looked like a rundown, harmless building. There was nothing particularly threatening about the outside, but when I looked up at one of the windows on the 4th floor, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Something red, something moving slowly, like a figure waving at me. She was there. She was watching me, waving from the 4th floor window with that monstrous smile. The car turned the corner, and the hotel disappeared from view. But the fear persisted. I had looked for too long. Now, as I write these words, I feel an increasing sense of dread. I don't know how far she can follow me. I don't know what's going to happen next. But one thing is certain. Something followed me from that cursed hotel. If you're reading this, please listen to my words. Don't stay at the Gateway Hotel, ever. And most importantly, follow the rules. The days that followed were a blur of fear and paranoia. I was back in my city, in my apartment, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Every time I passed by a window, my reflection seemed distorted, as if something was behind me, watching, always lurking. I knew that what happened at the Gateway Hotel hadn't stayed behind, that the cursed presence had followed me. All the time, that image, the woman in red, her grotesque smile, her empty gaze, invaded my thoughts, eating away at my sanity. On the first night back home, I turned off all the lights in my apartment, locked every door, and tightly closed the curtains, as if that could protect me. I convinced myself that I was just getting carried away by my imagination, that the nightmare was over. But when I woke up at 4:14 a.m. to the shrill sound of the phone, I knew I was wrong. I knew what that meant. The hotel's curse had followed me home. The phone rang incessantly. That sound pulled me out of a restless sleep, where distorted images of the woman in red floated in my mind. I looked at the clock beside the bed. 4:14 a.m. My eyes widened in fear. It couldn't be. I wasn't at the hotel anymore. But the rules, those cursed rules, seemed to have followed me. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't answer the phone. The rule was clear, even though I was no longer at the hotel. That call would bring nothing good. I remembered what it said. If the phone rings at 4:14 a.m., do not answer. I lay there, motionless, watching the phone ring, the sound filling the room like an alarm, keeping me frozen in bed. It must be a mistake, I whispered to myself, as if those words could chase away the growing fear. But the truth was, there was no mistake. This was no accident. The phone continued to ring for almost a minute, each second stretching out as if time itself had been distorted. And then, it stopped. The silence that followed was so absolute that I could hear my heart pounding violently in my chest. I hadn't realized until that moment just how tense I had been, my hands sweaty and my body trembling. I looked around, waiting for another sound, anything, but all I could hear was my own breathing, fast and shallow. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, that the call was just a prank, or maybe one of those telemarketing calls at the wrong time. However, No matter how hard I tried, something inside me knew it was more than that. It was a sign, a reminder that I had broken one of the hotel's rules. And now, I was paying the price. Morning came slowly, and though I hadn't slept again, I stayed in bed until the first rays of sunlight broke through the tightly drawn curtains. When I finally summoned the courage to get up, my muscles were stiff, as if they had been stretched to the limit throughout the night. I dragged myself to the kitchen, trying to pretend that everything was normal, that the nightmare was over. I put the coffee on, and the bitter smell filled the room. I tried to focus on simple tasks, clinging to anything that could bring me back to normality. But it didn't take long for the illusion to be shattered. That very same day, around 3 p.m., as I was getting ready to leave, I heard a muffled sound coming from the front door. What struck me wasn't the fact that I heard noises, but the quality of the sound. It was soft, like a subtle knock, almost a whisper. I approached the door cautiously, my heart already racing in my chest. "It can't be," I whispered to myself, trying to push away the memory of the rules. The sound continued, soft, intermittent, gentle knocks, almost timid, as if someone was on the other side, patiently waiting for me to open the door. My mind was in panic. I remembered what had happened at the hotel, the child crying for help in the hallway, the insistent knocking on the door. With a trembling hand, I peered through the peephole. My heart stopped as I saw nothing. The hallway of my apartment building was empty, illuminated by cold, artificial light. There was no one there, and yet the knocking continued. Each tap seemed like a provocation. I quickly pulled away from the door, trying to process what was happening. The fear I had felt at the hotel had followed me here, but how was that possible? I had escaped from that infernal place, but it was as if the rules had stuck to me, trapping me in an endless cycle of terror. Each knock was a reminder that I was marked, that somehow I couldn't escape. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. The feeling of being watched was constant. Even with all the lights off, I could feel that familiar presence. The apartment was silent, but the air around me seemed heavy, dense, as if I was being slowly suffocated. At any moment I expected to see the smile of the blonde woman in red in the mirror, the window, or in the darkness of my bedroom. The following days were a slow descent into madness. I began hearing whispers in places that were once quiet. Soft, unintelligible whispers, but always present. Worse yet, the knocking on my door returned, always at the same time, always the same subtle sound, like fingers lightly scratching the wood. I knew I couldn't open the door, but the pressure was mounting. Each knock wore me down a little more. Finally, in a moment of desperation, I decided I couldn't continue like this. I set out to try to understand what was happening to me, to understand what that hotel had done to me. I began searching the internet for information about the Gateway Hotel. I needed to know if others had experienced the same. The research, however, was shocking. There was almost nothing about the hotel. No recent reviews, no guest accounts, nothing except for an old record stating that the hotel had been closed for decades. Closed? That didn't make sense. I had been there. I had seen it. I had felt the terror firsthand. But all the evidence pointed to a disturbing truth. The hotel shouldn't exist. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell had happened to me? If the Gateway Hotel had been closed for so long, where had I stayed? And more importantly, what had I brought back with me? As I typed these words, the knocking at my door has returned. Louder this time, more insistent. I know I shouldn't open it, but with every knock, I feel like I'm losing control. She's here, and this time, she won't give up so easily. If you're reading this, understand, follow the rules, and don't look for too long.